right, looks like we're connected and live on all platforms.
All right, everybody, welcome back to a little special episode of the Walk the Talk America podcast. I am joined by Kevin Berry, marketing expert for. I always like calling you the marketing expert for Walk the Talk America.
My
Do you
title
consider
changes every week. It's Guru.
um, and today we're going to recap uh, my visit to Utah to talk about the Stop the Stigma Together conference. It was the first of its kind. It was held in Salt Lake City, Utah at the American Grand Hotel. And I was co-presenting with Mental Health America on the stigma that both the mental health and the firearms community face. This is the second time that Debbie and I, in our history, in this field have co-presented. The very first time was many years ago in Santa Fe, and that was a hit. And I had suspected this one was going to be too, and I'm happy to say that it really went well. It was a pretty cool conference to attend.
what, ye-
What?
what year was Santa Fe? Was that like 18, 19?
Yeah, that was 19, and that was at a conference. Just on just strictly mental health, and it was that was the first time we were presented together. It was kind of when we had our full-blown partnership where we were um, let's just say things aren't the way they are now. They weren't the way they are now back then. It was very different kind of relationship, but we're trying to come back together now because I think they see the importance of what we do. This conference was full of researchers. There was not as many mental health clinicians as I thought there would be, but just seemed like everybody worked in suicide prevention of some sort. I know people were there to make relationships and get money. That was another thing. There were people chasing funders there. There were funders there, and there was everyone from there was a congressman there, Steve Ellison. I had a great conversation with him. He's very pro 2A Republican. He actually wasn't even going to attend our meeting and made time to get in there. And it was crazy because at the end we kind of did the Q&A, and he took the microphone and was making a few points that I already made from the time that he wasn't in there. So I think Walk the Talk America is something that he's going to be interested in the future, which is kind of cool because that is the one area that we get ignored on, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. It's just, I'm not sure people know how to handle us. But he loved everything I was talking about.
That's cool. Yeah, I know you have a lot of kind of behind the scenes conversations that you can't always talk about with people that maybe are in government or stuff like that, trying to understand your point of view and your expertise. So it'll be interesting where that goes. How was kind of the setup? Was it you guys had what 60 minutes, or did a presentation and then it was Q&A after?
Yeah, we had an hour and a half, and
wow.
we had a hard stop, and that was the funny part is when Debbie and I were putting the presentation together, she was worried that we weren't going to fill the time. And I kept telling her, I said, every time that you feel like there's a pause or you've said what you need to say, I said, just kick it to me because I guarantee you whatever topic we're talking about, I have an anecdotal story that will fill the time. And sure enough, we went over our time. We pretty much were almost in there for 2 hours. We, at the very end of the Q&A, and this happened in Santa Fe too. As soon as everybody finished, people came up to, ask questions after. And I was sitting at the edge of the stage, and these one of the directors of the thing said, "Hey, listen, like I know you guys all want to ask him questions, but can you walk with him?" And I look like the Pied Piper because there's like 7 people, and I was just walking out and still fielding questions. which is kind of cool, because it shows you how the presentation touched or affected people, or they wanted to hear more. So I would say we crushed it. And I remember at one point I was in the lobby, and Debbie was like, sitting there, and she's like, I think that went so well. And she's like, I can't believe like people kept filing in and people stayed the whole time. And I was like, no, we crushed it. Like I knew we would, though. You know what I mean? Like it's new concepts that people haven't heard before. So I feel like they're really into it, and it's not the same old thing. Regardless that there were a lot of pro gun people in there, because a lot of people vocalized that when they had the Q&A, but they were excited. Like there was like 3 people that asked me for they said, hey, can I give you my information, can you send us one of the WTTA kits that has the bands and the cards so I can use it and distribute it to my people. So those are always positive signs, you know what I mean? And once again, no pushback from anybody negative, like nothing. I keep waiting for that day when someone tries to really argue with me about something, and it just doesn't happen. So I feel like we present the information in a way that doesn't make people emotional, just gives them the facts, and we have a discussion. That was the other thing. Like we said, we want to talk with you, not at you. That's Debbie's big tagline, and we did that. It's pretty cool.
What were some of the maybe best questions you received from the audience?
I had a really interesting one that I look back on now, and I feel like I fumbled. I want to talk about that one because it kind of sticks with me. This lady got up, and she made it a point to say, like, clearly I'm from the LGBTQ community. And she's like, I live in Utah where guns are a way of life. And she's like, I have 3 friends that are totally into firearms, and it just seems like they don't get it. And I was kind of like, well, what don't they get? And she's just kind of like responsibility. And we argue about these things all the time. And I'm like, look, I'm like, I don't know exactly, what kind of conversations you're having. So it's hard to answer this question, right? Because I don't know what they're arguing about. I don't know if they're arguing like, does she feel like her friends don't lock their guns up or leave them out or whatever, and she was just like, how do you get somebody that's so stuck in their ways? And I kind of gave her the canned answer of like, meet them where they're at. And I kind of wish I would have made her give me an example of what she was talking about, because I feel like if it was something to where she felt like these friends weren't being responsible gun owners, then I would have totally had a different answer. And I'm looking back on it now. To me, I would have said something to the effect of like, every negative outcome of firearms gets used against us. Like, that type of thing, to make the friend think and kind of bring them into responsible gun storage, something like that. But, most people were complimentary. Most people were asking about, they were curious about the response that I get from kind of the non-firearm crowd, the gun neutral. We got a lot of good feedback. Like I used at one point the term like gun neutral, and I think a lot of people identified with that, because I had 2 people come up to me and they're like, hey, I never even thought about that. I always thought pro-gun, anti-gun. And they were both like, I'm gun neutral. You like taught me that term, which was cool. The questions were more positive reinforcement than they were questions. This one lady got up and she's like, I'm an NRA member. I have a firearm tattooed on. I'm like, I'm so glad you're here. Which, is important. Like that to me is important because it shows that they probably do a lot of these conferences and they never feel like this is addressed in this way.
Yeah, or maybe they're disappointed at who the individual is that represents maybe the firearms industry or the gun point of view, and all those people maybe were showing up to hold that person accountable if they were maybe below their standards, and obviously, you're not that.
Yeah, and it's really cool because when you go to these things, there's different walks of life, and the mental health crowd, they think about a lot of stuff where, I think the 2A crowd's more like, hey, we're welcoming, like just come on in. If you're into firearms, you're welcome here. Whereas the mental health crowd, like they really they want to know details. Like, what do you have for the Black community? Like at one point I got asked that, and I got to bring up Kids the Kings, and I got to talk about like Maj's work and, you know, um, introducing firearms in a healthy manner to underprivileged, underserved areas. And I think that's appreciated, right? Because I don't think they're gotcha moments, but I think they're these kind of moments where it's like, okay, Mr. Gun Guy, you know what I mean? Even though I'm the gun guy, right? But Mr. Gun Guy, like, let's see if we can catch you, which is good because I believe in checks and balances. I believe that people are allowed to question things or say, like, you're up there saying all the right things, but are you really, really well rounded when it comes to what you're saying? And those opportunities, it's a chance to kind of expand on everything, and then it's also a chance to divide the whole gun violence number up into different categories and talk about, like, hey, we do ourselves a disservice by lumping it all together because it's not the same solution for every problem, which is cool. And for them just to see Debbie standing next to me, and the relationship Debbie and I have, I think is a good thing because we had a couple people too that said I would have never guessed you two would be co-presenting together. It's really cool to see, right? Mental Health America and Walk the Talk America. I mean, for as many people in the firearms industry, I still have no idea who we are after 6 years. I think about the mental health community. They definitely don't know who I am. They know Debbie, but they don't know who I am. So I think there'll be many more co-presentations to come just because of the success of it. And it's once again, like I said, the whole conference to me, it's everyone's trying to solidify their future. It was interesting though. There was a lot of academic people there. I had a couple of people approach me in a nice way that kind of pointed out, hey, like, did you ever think about this and what this could do to somebody if they take their screening? And I'm like, you need to talk to Debbie. I was a mental health expert. I am not a mental health expert. I am from the firearms industry. I can only take the tools that are acceptable for us to use, and resources and implement them through our channels. Like, that's what we do, right? We facilitate, we help people, we educate people. But in terms of the science behind all that stuff, it was kind of interesting listening to them go back and forth. But the researcher's mind is very different than the typical person. I mean, they really analyze things. And I got to use like some of my classic taglines, like, don't let data get in the way of saving a life. Like, I love saying that to crowds because everyone's like, damn, I want to argue with him, but what he just said sounded, you know. But overall, like, just super positive. And these are the things. Hey, and who knows? Debbie and I were talking about it. We were having, the hot topic of the conference was, for people that wanted to engage in talking about firearms, was the Surgeon General coming out and making firearms a public health crisis, right? And I don't get as upset as others do when it comes to that because I kind of understand the game. And at one point, I was like talking to Debbie. This is before we went on. We were just like sitting there, kind of pre-gaming, just making sure that we covered we were looking at the slideshow on the computer, and we got on the discussion about the Surgeon General. And I said I kind of feel like it's a cash grab like if they declared a public health emergency, it's just researchers finding a way to get more money. And she didn't disagree with me. You know what I mean? But it was nice to have like these open conversations, because I know you and I had these discussions like when they declared it a public health emergency. It's just like that's also an opportunity, but obviously we're confident. We look at these numbers and we're like, these are opportunities for us to make cases for Walk the Talk America, right? And why we need to get this funded and move forward with this. Whereas everyone else just takes it as a personal attack in the 2A community. Like, oh, but it's like, really, people, come on. Doesn't matter how much more research they do. These numbers, everybody knows what the issues are. And it's not like we're going to discover anything new that's going to be used against us. They're just going to continue to do the same. The same actors are going to do the same roles. If they're anti-gun, you're gonna use any kind of new research against us. And if you're pro-gun, you're gonna be livid and still know exactly where the problems are. So to me, that doesn't bother me as much. But that was a hot topic there. Like, people kept asking me what I think, and nobody disagreed with me when I just rolled my eyes, and I was just like, we already know what the issues are. It's suicide.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
that's the biggest kind of disappointment. I know we were texting group thread individually, different people about it. And yeah, it's kind of the same thing of, oh, we need to research to then come to the table with solutions. All right. We already have a lot of solutions. Now we haven't tried it on a national scale or gotten the funding to do that to figure out how much they positively impact it. But why are we going to do a whole nother round of all the things that we kind of already know the answers? Suicide's an issue, youth violence among Black individuals with like Kids to Kings. What would happen if Kids to Kings went on the road and did a training in every larger urban city in the United States over the next couple of years on gun safety and positive kind of gun culture? What would be the impact of that? So I think that's the frustration coming where exactly what you said. It sets them up to, oh, we need a lot more research. The research is kind of already out there.
Yeah, it was Utah, and people are like, what does that mean? Utah, I knew there was going to be a lot of more gun neutral, pro gun. It's kind of like Santa Fe, right? Where I'd really like to test our skills in a co-presenting in a conference would be, say, somewhere in California or New York. Like, I would like to break out of the whole like cowboy culture or suicide belt, just because like in Utah, guns are common, right? Like, everybody has guns, and suicide is their number one killer in that state. Like, that's the biggest bucket, right? When it comes to gun violence. So I knew there was going to be a little bit more of an understanding. But at the same time, they're hearing new information, right? So, I mean, when I talked about Kids to Kings, it's just like at that moment, and how I kind of put it in perspective of like a lot of these kids had never gotten a chance to even be introduced to a firearm in a healthy manner. It was crazy. You could see like in unison, the whole crowd was just nodding. And it was a pretty good crowd. There's definitely over 100 people in there. And it kept growing. So I think people were walking by and they were stopping in and staying. And that was to Debbie's point earlier. So the information, I mean, we even got somebody wrote something on Facebook, right? Like, yeah, it was something like how refreshing it was to see something about firearms there. I can't remember the exact verbiage, but like just seeing that was cool. We're talking about firearms and mental health in a way that no one's ever heard of before. And that's really what's groundbreaking to a lot of people, because I guarantee you Debbie's been around this game for so long. And I kept asking her, how has it been going in these other seminars, like for you? Because I sat in a couple, and it's all new to me. So when I sit in one, this is kind of like being at Aspen, right? Like when I sit in they're boring to me, but yeah, half the time I don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna learn just because, it's a method. I was thinking about it. I'm like, if this doesn't work out for me, I could definitely probably transfer over to the other side in terms of like, getting somewhere in healthcare, but for Debbie, she's just like, I could teach most of these just knowing the topic. I could go up and present, but she's like, but I've also been doing this for so long. And she's like, I always have to remind myself that some of these people are brand new to this. So if she's saying that about the people that are in those other seminars, what are they thinking when they're in ours? Right? Like this is all new concepts. So I can see why people get super excited about it. It's just like,
Yeah, I brought up the Facebook post from somebody they attended. They said one amazing thing was an organization called Walk the Talk America that's bridging the conversation between gun ownership and suicide, and then citing suicide by firearm as the second leading cause. 69 humans a day commit suicide by firearm, and for gun enthusiasts who vigorously support the Second Amendment but also struggles with suicidal ideation, it is a much needed conversation between what are usually opposing sides.
yeah, and I think I remember exactly who that lady was, because she at the end of the Q&A like got up and said, I've battled with depression my whole life and substance abuse, and basically told a story about responsible firearms ownership. Like her and her partner or her husband have an understanding that they'll store guns safely if they ever hit crisis and stuff like that. So that really spoke to her, which is cool. But like I said, everybody in there, for the most part, and I always say this, you can tell the pro gun people. You could tell the pro gun people because they are almost like nodding their head like they're at a rock concert. Or they're going like the pointing or the, so you could tell like they're hearing something that they're like, oh God, I didn't expect that. I was kind of waiting to hear about how we're irresponsible and we're villains and we do, like it's just the classic, I guess, mental health professional talking about gun safety and gun responsibility. So to me, it becomes a little bit easier because it's like now I'm showing you what's going on, but where it really feels good, and I gotta be honest, is like the people that I couldn't even tell, and they had like a banquet after. We had a cocktail reception hour. Now I don't know anybody there besides Debbie, so like there are moments when Debbie has to go talk to people and I'm not going to stand there. You know what I mean? And I could tell like she wants to talk to them. Like, oh, I got to go over here real quick. And so I'm standing there by myself. And where you really see love is when someone comes up and they're like, hey, I was in the thing, I was in your conference today. I just want to shake your hand. Good job, man. That was awesome. You know what I mean? Like that feels the best. Especially when they're like, yeah, I'm not really even a gun person, but I really thought that was awesome. You guys crushed it. Those are the things that make you feel real good.
Did you get a chance? I know we were working on parts of the presentation last week. Did you get a chance to ask the audience a question like they maybe gave you the opportunity, or you guys had so many questions you didn't even get the chance to?
We asked the very first question on our list. We had come up with that list. We asked the very first question. There's like one mental health clinician. The very first question was like, how do you talk to your clients about firearms? And this guy got up and actually like she kind of singled him out because everyone was kind of sitting there, I guess the question didn't really pertain to many people in the room, but he answered it perfectly. He was like, I meet my firearms owners where they're at. Like he said all the right things. And then basically the floodgates opened and there was like 7 people that stood up that was like had a question. So all of our questions got thrown out the window because we wouldn't have had time. Like I said, we definitely didn't have time because I got swarmed right after and I was just sitting on the stage, like kind of just, okay, you next, you next, you know what I mean? Like, and then I was walking out and I was still fielding questions, and I got into the lobby and I sat there for another 15 minutes fielding questions from people. So there was no time. It's kind of funny. I we needed more time. Like we had a little counter and I could see it. So I didn't even get a chance to tell some of the stories that I wanted to tell. And if I did have to like crowbar something in real quick, like I'd have to be like, okay, Debbie, before you go to that next slide, I just want to tell this really fast story. But time flies when you're up there, you know, like you hear like, oh, you have an hour and a half, and you think, man, how are we going to fill the time between what we do together and the way we bounce off each other and play off each other? It's not a lot of time.
Did you get the whole hour and 30 for your talk, and then the questions extended it to 2 hours, or did they just kinda see the popularity of it and just kinda let loose and not play the music to get you guys off stage?
Yeah, I think they kind of just saw the popularity of it and they just tried to push it. They were doing pretty good at like staying on track just because they had events and they had to get to stuff. And then there was that cocktail hour at 6:30. We went on at like 2:15. Um, and then the next group that was presenting, it was funny, like they were setting up around like where I was at the stage, and I remember looking at the lady and she's like, hey, you do your thing, like I just gotta, we're setting up for ours, you know what I mean? So um, I think it was just all good. I hope to hear some feedback from the people that put the event on. I hope some people um, wrote in, just like that lady put that little testimonial on Facebook. I hope some people write in and say like that was really fascinating, um, just like everything though, just like Walk Talk America is first of its kind. They've never seen that. And we're sitting there with Debbie, and we were at the banquet, and it was cool. We got to see Apollo Ono speak. He was the keynote speaker. Many people don't know who that was or is, but for me, it was back when the Olympics were important to most Americans, and we were glued to our TV. And just hearing his story, because I never knew his story. I just knew he was a good speed skater. But his struggles with mental health and kind of like overcoming that and becoming an Olympian was really cool to listen to. But like the gun industry, they have banquets and they are long and boring and dark, and they feed you. But I felt like I was at like the NSSF banquet or like the NASGW award show. But this time it was cool just to kind of see, the keynote speaker crush it up there. He was funny. He was Olympian. He joined the Olympic team at like 14, which is insane to me. Like 14 years old and you're on that big stage. That's just wild. But we were sitting at the banquet and we were kind of talking about what had happened that day. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to go out and get us more money because we need to take this show on the road. More people need to know this exists and they need to see it. So hopefully she comes through with that. We're supposed to go to Washington, and it's the next one. She's trying to get that one locked down, but it would be kind of cool just to do one of these at least a quarter, because I think it gives people hope.
Yeah, and like you say, I mean, I think it's Seattle, right? It's not New York or California as far, but Seattle's probably a little bit different crowd than Utah, as far as demographics go, so that'll be interesting how little differences or anything like that goes.
Yeah, and I told her, I said, I was like, I bet you if we saw a video of us in Santa Fe in 2019, we've come a long way. I know I have. It's just we're completely in two different places. And one of the things that I really wanted to stress, because Walk Talk America pretty much utilizes Mental Health America's screening service, right? It powers ours. But that's where kind of our relationship stops, right? But I kind of made it a point to explain to the crowd, like they gave me the freedom to run with that, you know. They gave me the freedom to put it in flyers and get it on boxes of other companies and kind of never bothered me about it. And you know, that freedom, that inspiration, that like accepting me, and even though we don't work hand in hand on everything that Walk the Talk America does, it's mostly Walk the Talk America programs. I was just trying to tell the crowd like no one ever would have put us together, like ever. And they check in and we keep in touch and we talk about things, and they call me if they need advice or ask about a bill or something like that. And um, I think that's what makes a relationship special is the trust that Debbie and the crew at Mental Health America have in kind of like, well, we support Walk the Talk America, and we love what he's doing. So going back to that hope thing, um, I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, and when it comes to mental health and firearms, sometimes feel like there's no hope, and we just keep crushing that. Like I said, it was all positive. One could say it's just, hey, it's just you're in Utah. It's a layup. It's like Santa Fe, gun states, right? Or Wisconsin, right? Like think about another state where we're pretty much welcome with open arms by, doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican in terms of like their political views. Um, oh, one funny thing that I got to tell you about. I don't even know if I told you. Maybe I did. Uh, one of the people that waited for me after was from Moms Demand Action, and really nice lady. And she's just like, I love it. Do you ever like do you know about the organization I'm affiliated with? It's called Moms Demand Action. I was like, I do. And I told her about like speaking at the Moms Demand Action event at San Jose State. And she's just like, yeah, I mean, I don't understand why all of the whole organization wouldn't know about you and really get behind what you do. And I'm like, they do. I'm like, believe it or not, they do. I'm like, Brady gets behind me. I mean, hey, I can't stop you from being a fan. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just kind of funny. And here I am, like, coming off of hanging out with Colleen Noir, and I can't really put his business out there, but there was a opportunity for somebody from Moms Demand Action to debate him, and that person I witnessed it had pulled out when they found out it was Colleen Noir because they said he was a bad actor. But I wanted to be like, hey, one of your people just like bailed on my board member to have a debate. So, but that was kind of funny. Nice lady though. Like, once again, I'm not here to, I say that to the crowd because I'm like, everybody has a different belief on how to solve these issues. And unfortunately, like some people are a little misguided, and I believe my way is the right way. And these people believe their way is the right way, but I also don't believe in feel good legislation. That's one of the things I like to say to the crowd. Right. And I said, I can't stand up here and tell you these, knowing damn well these things won't save one more life, and I think the crowd always respects that. A few times I had a couple of people ask me about the AR thing, and they're like, how do you feel about ARs? And I used the tagline I always use. I was just like, well, what if I told you that I could stop drunk driving by banning red sports cars? And both of the people that asked me that go, I would think you're crazy. I go, that's how gun owners feel about people when they say ban ARs. And it's so funny because I was just like, yeah, to ban something that kills less people than hands and feet every year. And it's funny, they don't know these statistics because both of the people I said that to, they're like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, hands and feet kill more people than ARs every year. And they're like, where'd you get those numbers? And I tell them where. And they're like, I never knew that. And I'm just like, yeah, that's the problem, right? And I was like, this is why these things are so important. And they respected that, you know.
Yeah, and that's what makes you successful. I mean, you started earlier in the conversation talking about the gun neutral, and that population doesn't even exist in so many things because it is anti-gun, pro-gun, and so many people are on the fence and only hear maybe one side of it to where they're open-minded. They just haven't heard people speaking towards them and educating them on the statistics. It's almost like politics where people feel like it's Republicans, Democrats, but there's a lot of people in the middle that maybe feel left out at times.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because when I was talking to the lady that was the pro LGBTQ, right? Like she wore it. She said, like, look at me, right out of the chute, I'm LGBTQ. And it was funny because I said, well, your struggle that you're having with the firearms people is the same struggle you had at one point, right? I said that was a group that was marginalized, and I was just like, clinicians didn't understand. And I kind of made the point. I was like, a lot of people aren't asking people to immerse themselves into it and completely understand it, but we're asking you to be pro understanding. And that really hit home with the crowd. Like, because I think like pro understanding is a completely different way of looking at it. Because it's like there are a lot of people that probably don't want to be pro gun, but they do understand what it means to be pro understanding. And that was the cool thing about it. And then after we were talking, because we continued the conversation, she was walking with me and stuff, and I kind of made her aware of some of the gun organizations out there that were like a little different that people didn't expect, right? I was talking about Liberal Gun Club, and she actually said, no, I'm part of one of those clubs in Utah. So obviously she's a gun owner. So that's why I feel like I fumbled, because I didn't really dive into what was the argument with your friends then, because you're a gun owner. You know what I mean? Like I actually like stayed up at night, like that, thinking, replaying that whole scenario, how I fumbled that. Because it would have been cool just for us to have an understanding of where she was coming from. It's like, what is her argument with her friends? If they're all gun owners and she's pro gun, what is the argument? Maybe they're being a little reckless, or maybe when it comes, like maybe her friends suffer from mental health issues and she worries about them. You know what I mean? I just didn't dive in enough, which I'm going to regret that one. I'm going to remember that. If it ever comes up again, at least I'll know to kind of be like, hey, I don't want to put your business out there, but could you give me an example? But overall, conference was great. And we got to keep doing these things. That's why it's so important for us to get out there and just like keep talking to people outside of the echo chamber. And if you can't do it, like and we could segue into this because I was on a podcast. I flew home. I gave blood. I'm trying to make.
You're not the best scheduler.
I'm trying to make myself look like a superhero. I got off the plane. I went home. I hung out for a little bit. I talked to my cousin who's in town, and then I went to give blood, did my thing at the Red Cross, and then I came back and I was on the Battle Line podcast with Chris Tonto Pronto from 13 Hours, right? And at one point, that was kind of a fun podcast because I really feel like I feel like we were filler. I was on there with Jay Hood from Walk Talk America. Those who are very familiar with Walk Talk America know Jay. He always accompanies me at SHOT Show. Great human being, was one of the first people to hear me speak publicly about Walk Talk America. But we got on the show, and I was looking at the time. I always like to do a little research. If I go on someone's show, I like to listen to a couple episodes, but I was like, an average episode is like an hour and 20 minutes. But we went over 2 hours yesterday, which was pretty damn awesome. But there's a point where Chris was like, man, you go into a lot of places that most people won't go into. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could stay calm. And that's, that was my point. I was like, well, that's why you need us out there, right? Like, that's why we're so important. Like, help, keep us around. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not afraid to go into any scenario and talk about what we're doing, what the gun industry is doing, and what the solution should be. And I've yet to fail in that arena. and I don't think we will. So that conference, that's why it was so important to be there. Like, it really is important. It's hope. People are tired of hearing the same things. And the gun people, for as much as we're going to be like, we're tired of hearing the same things, they're tired of hearing it too. Like, most of them in there, they're tired of hearing it too. They just want to hear solutions or something's happening. And once they hear that, that's when you get the gun neutral to come forward, and every gun owner will tell you, like, no, we don't expect everybody to own a gun and want to shoot a gun. We get it, but we want you to be understanding, and we want to be heard. We want to be listened to. So I'm looking forward to the future on it.
And those two conversations are almost very similar, because how you got connected with the podcast was Jay sat next to one of them on a plane ride. I don't know where they were going, but kind of whatever they talked about, they were like, "Oh, you should come on," and then he said, "Oh, you need to have Mike on with me." So it wasn't some big expectation. I don't know how much research they did into you, but you pleasantly surprised, and then that podcast went so long and that conversation went well. Maybe because they didn't expect it. Maybe it was, oh, this will just be a filler episode. This Jay is pretty cool. He sounds smart on the plane ride, and then it was so much more. Same with the kind of mental health or healthcare dominated summit. Very low expectations. It's like some maybe scrawny kid that comes into the gym. Everybody's maybe expecting him put on a bench press just the bar, and then he puts on a few plates and bust out some reps and surprise, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, this is pretty
Yeah.
cool."
Yeah, like I said, I really feel like we were a filler episode. And I remember Jay had to politic to get me on the show, like, because Ian, the other co-host, he's the main host, right? He basically was saying, and this episode will be out next Tuesday for those who are listening. I know G-Web's had a question about the conference. The conference was filmed, and I think it'll be available through the Stop the Stigma Together website. I think you just got to sign up there. But I'll find out more information and we'll leak it when it's available, in terms of like what you got to do to see it. I think it'll be behind a registration, but it will be available. But yeah, this Battle Line podcast is coming out Tuesday, and I feel like that the fact that it went so long, and Chris kept saying, "I have one more question. I have one more question. I promise. I promise." And it kept going and going and going. I love it, because it was just a great conversation. And it turns out that you'll laugh at this, Kevin, because I didn't tell you this. So I assumed, because Jay's from Denver, and when he was telling me about this guy, he said that they were on a plane together and they went to get. So I just assumed he flew back to Denver after SHOT Show. And the host of the show was like, because I was like, we got off the plane in New York. And I'm like, wait a minute. You went from SHOT Show to New York, Jay? And it was kind of a running joke between the show, because, Jay's mysterious. Jay doesn't even have social media. Because there came a question that Chris asked Jay. He goes like, hey, how do you deal with social media? And I just started laughing. I go, you just asked the wrong guy. I said, you have a unicorn on your show. He doesn't have social media, which is annoying at times, but so freeing for Jay. Right? Like, he just doesn't have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So I always have to like send him. I assume he sees stuff, and I have to remember he doesn't see it. He's siloed. But anyway, so I said, why were you in New York City? Like, what were you doing there? And why didn't you tell me? Like, we're boys. And he's just like, I don't know. He's just like, he goes, I went to go see Andre 3000. And the host knew, because I guess he was, they were on a plane talking. Ian's like, yeah, how was it? It was like his flute jazz concert, right? And he was like, it was crazy. I'm like, you went to see Andre 3000 and we spent a week together and we didn't have that discussion? Just Jay, man, he's just built differently. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, I went to Brooklyn. And I was just like, wow. But yeah, that same thing. Like, they had that discussion at January. They finally got us on the show. And I feel like as they unpacked it and peeled the onion back, it became fascinating to them, because I know for a fact Chris Chris didn't remember me, that I refreshed his memory that I had interviewed him for the Talking Lead podcast in my booth at the NRA show, I think in 2017. And, he was like, refresh my memory. And I told him some specifics about the conversation. And he was like, oh my God, I do remember you, so that was kind of cool. But, just reaching that audience, I think that episode is going to be fun. So, and we'll obviously post it when it's out, but I think it's a really cool interview, and more nuanced discussion, things like that. Right. And we've come such a long way. Now, I will say, anytime that I'm on the phone with someone who's seen or a phone or a podcast with someone who's seen combat, and that's where I want to give credit, is the veteran community. They were like a mini Walk to Talk America before Walk to Talk America, like in terms of like taking care of your own and circling the wagons and creating your own programs for each other. So it's really kind of cool to hear, like, Chris told a story, and I don't want to give away the whole podcast, but it was 2 hours. So I'm going to talk about a little piece of it. But Chris told a story about a time when he was in crisis and he actually turned his guns in. I guess there was a program wherever he was at that took him for 30 days. And that was the agreement. So he signed him over. And obviously I told him, I was like, you got your guns back? And he was like, oh, absolutely. So he knew probably going into that, this is what the deal is. But he did the 30 days without the firearms just to make sure he was in a good place. That's him voluntarily, like, putting him over. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? Responsible gun ownership and understanding that, everything's temporary. And if you go through a crisis, just know you're going to get through it and do whatever you have to do at the time to stay alive. Like, there's no outside threat that's more important than the threat within when you hit that, that time when you go into that crisis. I know a lot
That's
of
interesting. But my mind's going to, that's really smart, because so many like ranges or shops have the struggle of like legality of how do we know when to turn like the guns back or something like that. That's a pre-agreed upon set time to where, hey, we agreed to hold them for 30 days and that's what we did. I feel like that would be almost a smart option for some of the ranges or states that are having trouble with potential liability of just a set kind of date time frame, and then once that time frame's up, you give them back.
Yeah. And I think he said the place that he took him to was, it was like, there's 3 options. It was like 30, 60, 90. We'll have to listen to it. But that was pretty cool to hear. And I don't even know if it was a gun shop, to be honest. Because he had kind of alluded to, I turned him in and I worked with the VA to get healthy mentally. But yeah, like I like that. I think transparency is the key in any of these situations, right? So it's just like, here's what we hold them, here's the options, and it's important that people get their guns back. So him telling that story and saying, yeah, I got my guns back, no problem, gives people a little faith. Because I know a lot of people are skeptical, right? Like I've heard people say to me, I would never give my guns back just in case I can't get them back, or give my guns to someone just in case I can't get them back. Right. Which is, then that presents a whole, another group of challenges that someone has to face. It's like, what do you do when someone is hell bent on not being away from their gun? Whether that's they feel like they won't get them back, or they feel like, the outside forces, a home invasion or something could happen, and I never would want to be caught without it. Which is always respectable. Like, you can't knock that feeling, because a gun makes you feel safe in your house. Like, I know it does for me. Yeah. And of course, like, nobody wants to be that one time I gave my guns up for a period of time, and that's when, like, the random act of violence happens. Like, nobody wants that, right? Like, and we like to say, we like to go through life, that's why I was always very empathetic to people that were like that, because I do it all the time too, right? Like, I think about that little girl that just got killed in Texas. You know, it was a big issue during the debate last night, about the illegal immigrants that killed her. And I've had a 12, you know, I have an 18, 16-year old, but you know, when they were 12, I used to let them walk to the store because you think like nothing's ever going to happen. Well, one anecdotal story can make you change your mind completely. Because, you know, when I see that young mother crying, you know, I'm just like, man, how many times have I let my kids go do something? You know what I mean? I knew where they were going, but you know, you still can't stop evil. So I get it when people don't want to give them up. I really do. But it's just like, damn, knowing that people, you know, most likely aren't going to have that home invasion. Now, there's certain demographic areas, right, where you could probably make a case like the firearm is more important. We could split hairs all day, but you know, just as someone who's just like ISIS is kicking down the door, I got to be ready. And it's like, yeah, you're not in a good way. Like you need to have a plan for this. But that was the other thing, like kind of cool about the conference was being able to share the mental health plan. A lot of people respected that. Once again, I saw a lot of like light bulbs going off over people's heads. Like, oh, I never even thought about that. You know what I mean? Just to have that frank discussion and just say like, yeah, gun ownership should come with the suicide prevention plan. Utah is a forward-thinking state, though. Like that guy Steve that I was talking about earlier, the congressman, he was sending me some PSAs that Utah's done for staying mentally healthy in firearms. So I think that they're kind of like a Wisconsin, you know, realizing that it's important to kind of talk about this stuff and have it come from the pro-gun people.
Yeah,
So
it's
that was
cool to
nice to
see
see.
the different states kind of get behind. All right, let's try to do something, try different things, like Louisiana with TAPS, where they were able to make some positive legislation for guns. And seems like Utah has some good things. And for those curious, Walk the Talk's fine tuning kind of a mental health plan, kind of guide ourselves, kind of getting some outside thoughts and feedback, but that'll be available soon too.
Yeah, 100%. I know probably G Webs is listening. I definitely got to send it to you, G Webs. Like, I think you'd be good to put eyes on it, and give your initial thoughts. But yeah, we got to get that out there just because that's just, every time I talk about that in a public space, people just, doesn't matter who they are, they just love it. You know, I talked about on the show with, with Chris, and Ian, and they both loved it. You know, it's just something we don't think about. And Chris totally agreed. He's like, yeah, you know, everybody always agrees. Like I know they're always agreeing when they're nodding and smiling because I always throw in the whole like safety thing and how we watch movies and we look for flaws when people in the movie are doing something stupid with a gun, whether that's really bad trigger discipline or muzzle flashing people. Like we are the people that see those things, and that's just part of being aware and prepared, right? Like we understand it, we see it, we know it, and you know, almost every gun owner, except you know, especially ones that have gone through some sort of training or gotten their CCW, is fully aware that you can't just shoot somebody in a defensive shooting and like your life's going to be good. Like we all know that. Like there's a lot on the line. So to make that judgment call, you have to be on it. And then you know bringing in that third thing, like saying, hey, you got to have this plan for the future. It's being prepared for the thing that you don't know is around the corner. Like I tell the crowd, hey, I don't plan on having dementia. No one in my family has really had it, at least that I know of, right? And but to not prepare for it, to have a plan with my family to say, if things start going sideways, I need somebody I love and trust to kick the plan into place, and I got to be on board with it, and we got to catch it early enough to where I'm cognizant and not stuck in my ways, you know. Um, and it makes you face a reality, which is you know what I love. Like none of us are getting out of here alive, regardless of what we do, unless we find a vampire or a time machine. We just keep going back, but you know someday something will happen and those guns got to go somewhere, and you know you need to have a plan for it. So I'm excited to kind of launch this thing.
Yeah, yeah, especially with so many gun owners that put in so much preparation for defending their home with a break-in, thinking of all the options of what happens if they come through the back door, front door, everything. Where, how am I going to get the kids? Every detail is kind of thought of. Put that same energy into something that's statistically more likely to impact you negatively. D-Webs, to no surprise, has another great question about the summit. How did it become an existence? Did WTTA get invited, or how did you get the invite and connected to it?
So it was put on by the Huntsman family, which I guess is a big family out of Utah, with a lot of money. And it's the very first of its kind. So this was an experiment, I think. And it looked like it was super well attended. I don't know the attendance numbers, but everything that I've been told, like expectation levels were met. I got invited through Mental Health America. Mental Health America submitted a proposal to be part of one of the sessions. So I didn't come up on their radar. I came up through Debbie and Mental Health America pulling me through. Um, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that people are realizing Mental Health America is a huge organization, and they're constantly politicking for money, and they're constantly politicking for, everyone in this space is fighting for money, just like Hold My Guns, just like Walk Talk America, just like NSSF, right? Like we're always looking for support. And in my opinion, I think this is a topic that appeals to both sides of the aisle. And I think Mental Health America recognized that. Um, and there's a need. So in some sort of way, I feel like Walk Talk America is kind of being wheeled out there in front of a crowd that might be center right. Like I said, there was a lot of gun owners in that room, and you could tell, which I have no problem with, because that means that we're getting out there and we're getting exposed to groups that we've never been exposed to before. So that's how we got pulled into it. It was kind of like recreate the magic we had in Santa Fe in 2019. And that opens up Debbie to kind of do her pitch. But at the same time, like I look at it as like it's an opportunity for Walk Talk America to land on people's radar and maybe get some funding. I was able to kind of tell that story a couple times about how every government grant I've ever gone for gets shot down. And we just don't get people like donating the money from that side. But, hopefully those things will change. But just to have the invite to be there. And, I know I'm overconfident when it comes to those things, but I have too much history of going into these places where, people are just like, okay, I mean, who isn't curious about firearms? So it's like, I know I'm going to get the attention in terms of like, people are going to be like, all right, I'm going to sit in this one. And ours was packed. A couple of the ones I went to didn't have half the attendance, that we had. So I think that's a positive thing. And then anytime you're speaking at a conference and people are walking by and they stop in and they sit down and they stay, that's another sign that you're doing well. But Debbie and I did a good job of like using humor. She did some ad lib things that were really cute. Debbie's really tiny, so I look like a giant next to her. And at one point, she did this thing, and she was talking about. She said, "And that's the long and the short of it." And she like came and put her arm around me, and it made the crowd go crazy, right? Because it was just like when she hugs me, she's like around my waist. You know what I mean? But like getting the crowd reaction, I did a couple of the typical lines that I get people to laugh at. I drop the nepotism thing and like, hey, you should do that if you ever get an opportunity in life to like go to work for your family's gun company. And those are the type of things I think people hear in the other sessions, or they hear in the lobby, and they're like, all right, people are laughing. Like, what's going on? Because a lot of those things are stuffy, man.
Yeah,
They really are. Like some speakers get up there and they literally read straight from the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it
Like,
reminds me of almost like a college lecture. There's maybe a handful of classes that are always packed and nobody misses it, and then there's others that are just dipping out or half full because it's not worth their time.
yeah, it's really there's nothing worse than when and I hey, look, public speaking is hard. Um, I don't want to, you know, for anyone that does it, even if you do it, if you're brave enough to go out there and stand in front of 100 people or more, and literally put yourself out there like that. But there's nothing that worse than when someone's just reading the PowerPoint that I could read. Like literally, I'm looking at the PowerPoint, and they're really not giving you anything more than the PowerPoint. I know it comes with nerves, so it's just it's a different beast when you get out there. 6 years of this, like now I'm really comfortable without even having a PowerPoint. Like I could just talk about things and see where I want to take it, and using the story of Walk to Talk America as the backbone. Um, but we had a PowerPoint, and it was easy to follow, and that's why I was super confident, because I kept telling Debbie, I'm like, Debbie, most of the time I get up there and I don't even have a speech. Like I just go. You know what I mean? I'm like, so now we have this. Um, and that thing almost handcuffs you a little bit, the PowerPoint. But yeah, it was good. And thank you, G Webs. Like it's anytime I get I get a high when I come off these things, because it's just um like I said, we're so villainized in many cases, and just to like go into this type of territory and come out and just it's always the after. It's always after, man, walking the hallway and just getting like, even in the bathroom, you're in the bathroom, dude's like, hey man, good job. That was awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not taking any more feedback than that, but just like people like that appreciate that you were there, and I made that point on the Battle Line podcast yesterday. I was just like, nobody, the expectation level of the gun industry is so low, and just to have like the USA Today write the article, all right, and sometimes we get so jaded and angry because it's like one bad thing after another. The Surgeon General making a public health crisis is just a complete eye roll for us. And you get angry. You feel like, hey, like our voices are never heard. And it's because we look at it and we go, okay, the Surgeon General made this a public health crisis. Is anyone going to ask us our opinion? They're not. They're going to put a team together of people that are researchers and mostly anti-gun to research and try to come up with solutions, right? And not even have us at the table. And that's one of the things I respect about Mental Health America, because she was saying that yesterday. Like Debbie made a point to go out of her way to tell the crowd all the gun stuff that she works with outside of Walk to Talk America. She's like, no one has Mike there, and I recommend it all the time. Because she works with the Biden administration and everything like that, and their little gun group. And she keeps saying, I don't understand why you don't have the gun people at the table. And I agree. It's like, I know you're not going to listen to me, but have me there at least, because maybe I can help in some sort of way, make you think about something. Once again, unintentional consequences was one of the topics that I kept hammering. I'm in that room and talking about red flag laws. I know there's some people in there that totally believe in red flag laws, but nobody challenged me on it because I was giving them my perspective. And I think that they don't challenge me on it is because how are they going to challenge me on it? I'm telling you my truth. My people are afraid to go get help because of red flag laws. It comes up over and over again. It scares them. And, they might be making someone unhealthy without even knowing it. And that's what they got to think about. I was talking to Steve. Oh, this is another conversation. I was talking to Steve Ellison. I don't remember a lot these days. Lots going on, but he was they came up with a program in Utah that they were kicking around that was you can voluntarily give up your guns for a period of time, but you wouldn't be ready. You wouldn't go through NICS, so you're not on there in the background system. And of course, they got a lot of pushback from it, but it was kind of interesting, it's kind of like what Chris was talking about. Like there's so many parallels. Like, so it's a system that's Utah based. It's still a list, right? Which a lot of people are like, no go. Like, I don't want that, right? But there would be some people that would use that as long as they knew that they weren't going to get punished for it. So it's like you, it was, I said, it's almost like you're red flagging yourself. And he's like, yeah, you are, you know, but it's not a red flag per se. It's not a permanent marker on you, you know? Um, but I always think those are the nuanced conversations that we got to have. And, you know, if someone were to ask me about that, I'd be like, hey, if you had that and it was a voluntarily, you know, volunteer thing, like you made the decision to do that, there are gun owners that would do it, because not every gun owner is this monolithic, you know, creature that like is the same. And we got to remember that. We got to always remind ourselves that most gun owners do not feel as passionate about like the 2A as we all do. You know, a lot
And
of gun owners buy a gun and just put it away.
yeah, I think what you have to offer is refreshing too for both populations that people think that you're not going to have success with. The gun neutral and the anti-gun hear all these, oh, if we just do this, we just do this, things would change, and nothing really changes. We see suicide rates go up and a lot of other things. And you're able to say, hey, here's why that language doesn't really work for gun owners. And here's what we see. Nobody asked us. It's like the healthcare community that doesn't consult the gun industry is trying to push a giant boulder, and there's things that are preventing that boulder from going anywhere that you and I hop on with a organization like, all right, that language is going to be a kind of deal breaker for firearm owners right there. Let's tweak that. Just little adjustments that they wouldn't have any idea of because they're not firearm owners or in part of the gun industry. And you provide little tweaks and adjustments that offer solutions that give people hope no matter where they sit on the conversation.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That I try not to be negative, you know. Like you think about cable locks, right? We 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 shit all over them as the gun industry, like the real 2A people, because they're like, yeah, we're never
Uh,
going to use those.
I had a
I mean,
positive thought yesterday when I went to the gun range with Jake to film some content. I brought my gun, and as I hope in the case, and the cable lock's still in the packaging, never used. But it gave me an idea of like most people would throw that away, but if some friend or something needed some tool that could be used for me to just use with their handgun or something like that, to where it's not totally useless and thrown in the trash. I could use that and then take the key with me. So I did think of that one positive with cable locks after all the times we maybe talked down on them.
well, I think there is positives, and that's what I was trying to say to the crowd, right? Because that came up at some point. Like I was kind of like, whether you use a biometric safe, a giant safe, or a cable lock in whatever situation you're at. But here's the thing: like I could easily get up there in front of a crowd that doesn't know any better, and that's proud of like the cable locks they distribute, and I could just crap all over that idea, right? I could be like, and all those go into the trash, right? But I don't want to be that 2A guy. I want to be like, you know what? A lot of people will knock them. A lot of people won't use them just because of you know how they feel that it gets in the way of their access to a firearm in a fast manner. But I was like, don't look at the cable lock as just like a cable lock to lock a gun. I was like, that's a symbol, right? Like there's a message that could come with a cable lock. That's an opportunity if you're handing that over to somebody, even if they don't use it. It's what you say with it, right? Like it's the message you carry with it. And it's the opportunity to introduce people to other resources in other ways. So it's just like, I feel like that's a big part of it. Because, you know, I think in the past, as the 2A community, like when people were like cable locks, and we just naturally be like, that doesn't work. You know what I mean? And just kind of be like, eh. But then once again, no other solution, right? Like not throwing up any alternatives. But it's like the older I get, the better I become at kind of like hearing what people are saying, not just crapping on whatever idea they have or what they think is great. Um, you know, but then kind of just saying like, okay, well, here's the issue with that. It's the nuance in it, right? And I think people respect that. It's just, you know, like you just said, right? It's another thing to add to that. Like, hey, I may never use this thing, but I might have a friend that might need it, so I'm gonna hold on to it, or I'm gonna give it to somebody else, right? Like that I know will use it. And it's just like we shouldn't dismiss these things. These are attempts, you know, whether they're virtue signal or not, or super effective. It, you know, there's
And it's
more you can do with it.
It's the depth of the conversation. I know in my profession, like, oh, don't put a QR code on Instagram or don't put a link in the Instagram caption, and all the marketers laugh. And it's easy to get popularity by just saying that. But for people that don't understand why you don't do it, by taking the time, hey, here's why you don't do it. It frustrates the user because those don't really work because the link's not live and all that. By having that conversation and explaining why, then there's progress from the population that doesn't understand instead of just gaining popularity with your crowd that already understands. But it's easy to just, oh, nobody uses that, don't be dumb. So it's very similar there. Um, I know we wanted this to be, or we didn't want. We thought this maybe would go 20 or 30 minutes, and we're already at an hour and 10, like it always happens. I definitely had two more questions I wanted to ask you. For somebody that's listening, watching, however they're joining, and they see you going to all these events and having success, what's your advice to them? Because I think it's very easy to get tricked at seeing you or Jake so polished and just having no hope of, wow, they're really polished, but they don't see the process that it took you to get there, and all the work you do behind the scenes.
Man, it's like batting practice. I think you got to keep practicing your pitch and kind of. I was having this discussion yesterday with my cousin. We were watching the debates, and there were a few times where both candidates didn't even answer the question that was asked of them, or they used like 20 seconds of their time to answer that question. So they got to fix that in the debates, because I really wanted to hear some of the answers that they had, and I know they were attacking each other and going off. But I really wanted to see how they would answer that question, even if they're straight lying. You know, because my cousin kept saying, "How would you have answered that?" And I don't even know what I'm talking about, and I found a way to BS my way through an answer where he was like, "Yeah, that sounds good," right? And I don't even know if, like, what I said was possible, but that's how my brain went, especially with the fentanyl stuff. Um, but it's just practice. It's just getting out there, and kind of honing your craft, and like thinking about all the different ways that you can get tripped up, right? But the one thing is emotional intelligence. I think you have to like disarm people. That'd be the first thing. Like, find common ground in how you're talking, um, to where people aren't like bowed up, or, oh, here comes just another gun person just saying the same old talking points, because that's what we think about them sometimes, right? Like, oh, they're going to say the same talking points. But I think it just comes with batting practice, which is getting in the cage every day and swinging away, and like literally just like perfecting it, and then memorizing what you're going to say. Like, you know, especially if you tell anecdotal stories, like those are great ways to kind of connect to the audience. um, and that's really what you got to do. You got to keep trying. I mean, I've had days where I was off, whether it's like I was just sleepy or something. And sometimes when I do a presentation to the East Coast, and they're like, we kick off at, 8:30 in the morning, and I'm like, it's 5:30 here. I'm just not going to be the same person I am when I'm like energized and had time to have coffee and think and things like that. But you just got to get out there and try, and fail, man. Don't be afraid to fail. Like, the biggest, I look back on it way that the crowd turned on me, but I should have known that. You know what I mean? And I should have been comfortable where I didn't hit the panic button and jump to the end of the speech, have to circle back. You know what I mean? But you got to just put yourself out there. And I mean, if you truly believe in what you're saying, then it's all good. Oh, that was talking with Collins last week. Colleen Noir was out in Vegas, just kind of blowing off some steam, but we were kind of talking about how could you, like I had made the comment that, the same one kind of Maj had made about like, hey, I could cross over to the other side and I'd be an asset, because I know the blind spots, I know the weak spots of the firearms industry. And we were both saying like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what that number is where you'd have to sit down and take that meeting. And we both agreed like we could never do it. Right. And like Collins asked me like, why couldn't you do it? And I said, because in the end, like I know I wouldn't be saving lives. Like no matter what I was getting paid to say, I wouldn't be saving lives. I would be doing a disservice to everything I do. I think I'd rather just want to take the Jake line and figure out some other profession for me, another way to make money. But that's believing in what you do and believing in what you say. If you truly believe in what you say, then as long as you prepare for the gotcha moments, or you prepare for the guy looking at you sideways, or the lady who's just angry, doesn't want to see people die, and doesn't know how to talk about this. So our only way is restriction or that. Like, once you're comfortable, like being like, why are you so mad? Relax. You know what I mean? Then you're good. And I appreciate people that know that they can't do it. Right. Like when I don't believe them, but like Chris yesterday on the podcast was just like, I could never do it. It's like, sure you could, dude. You're personable. Like you get it. You've been there. You know what I mean? Like, you know the answers to all these questions. You know what won't work.
Yeah.
Maybe you
It's
just gotta
almost,
get
I couldn't do it today of being in that
right.
crowd and not getting emotional, but not that they could never do it if they dedicated a little time to practice and go out and fail.
Yeah, there's a story that I don't really share this too often. There's some people that know it. There's some people that know it because I tried to get them to do it and they said hell no. But after Sandy Hook, I got contacted by Pierce Morgan. Is Pierce Morgan? Is it the English guy?
That sounds right. We'll check.
Yeah, I think it's Pierce Morgan. I think his name's Pierce Morgan. He had a show. It was like on CNN or something.
I think Piers Morgan. Yeah, you were close.
Yeah, Piers Morgan. Yeah. And he his people contacted me, and they thought because Eagle Imports was in New Jersey and his studio was in New York, they wanted to have me come on his show. And I literally I just knew better. I was like, man, no, like I'm not prepared, because I was not who I am now. Right. I mean, Walk the Talk America didn't even exist in like, I think it was like 2012 or whenever that happened. Right. And I was just like, absolutely not, I appreciate you. And I had like a really good dialogue with the girl who called, and she was like, well, do you know anybody that would? So I gave her like Martin's number from Arms Corps, like the president. I remember Martin called me and he's like, what are you trying to do to me? You trying to get me killed? Sure. I was just like, no, you should go on there. It'll be good publicity for you, but it's so funny because I knew better and I wasn't who I am now. And I wasn't as confident in my, I guess, love for the Second Amendment, in terms of just like, there could have been a lot of gotcha moments. And I'm glad I didn't go on there, because I would have defaulted to like Second Amendment, private from gold dead hands. Like I think back now, like if I would totally go on there now, because I think there's so much that I could offer in that moment. And, a lot of people were like, yeah, it's good you didn't go on there. It's like a buzzsaw, right? Like you weren't going to win that battle, because everyone's still highly emotional from these kids getting slaughtered by this evil person. And, but I think about that one a lot. Like I was just like, man, I had that opportunity to go like big time on CNN or whatever years ago, and I passed on it, knowing I wasn't ready, and probably is not the best time to talk about those things, just because people are emotional and they would have probably censored me and whatever. But now, like, those are the opportunities I think about. Like, I'm like, wow, I'd love to go back and take another crack at it, I'm not afraid after any kind of tragedy to go on and talk about things. But that's just because of Walk Talk America.
Yeah, and lots of time building your craft. I mean, I remember the first level one course that we had to reshoot. You were trying to run the Zoom and be on there and present at the same
Ugh.
time, and come a long way since then. When I was texting you, all right, and the screen share, you're done with your presentation. Let's put you back on camera, and the countless
I
hours.
remember the first live like cultural competence course we threw in Reno. I remember Rob Pincus and Jake, who they do that stuff in their sleep. Like they go up, I mean, they could go up and talk for an hour and a half and not even and stuff like that. It's like crazy. And I remember like I went up there and I came off and they were like, well, what happened? And I was like, was it bad? And they're like, bro, like I wasn't bad, but like what happened? Like why you were so uncomfortable? And I was just like, so it's just I think about those times and I still get chills, like the douche chills, you know what I mean? I was just like, man, you fumbled. But it's funny, you look at just like life, like if you look at like the very first video that Snoop Dogg did, like with Dr. Dre, is a 187 video, and like Snoop doesn't even look in the camera. Like he's literally rapping down. Like he's clearly nervous. You know what I mean? And it just takes time. It takes a lot of time. This is not easy. I respect people that can just publicly speak, like the Kevin Dixies, Rob, like people that could just like get up. What are we talking about? This is what you're talking about. And then they could talk about it for an hour and they're like, yeah, I don't really know about it, but I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'd feel the same way. I mean, I have to talk different things, whether it's marketing professional or even stuff like this to business leaders or people like that, or even virtual podcasts. That's no problem. But if I had to get in front of 100, 200 live audience, that the nerves would definitely be going high.
And it's crazy because it's funny. There were times when I'd be like at a bar and I had a few drinks and there's no audience except for like 4 or 5 people, and you just murder that. You know what I mean? Like the way that you talk, the way that you can present things and ideas and like, segue into the next subject. And it's just like when the lights hit you and you're staring at a crowd of over 100 people, it can be a completely different beast. And it's just like the same people that we used to call them like, basketball, like, when I played basketball, I played football, like they were killers in practice. They were killers in practice, and then the real game came and then they disappeared and they never could show up. It's that same thing with public speaking. Like you really gotta you gotta do it. But anyways.
Yeah, definitely the visual. I mean, even like we're doing now, we've had podcasts where there's 20, 50 people watching, and it doesn't really matter because it's not the visual feedback of the lights on, you're on stage, everybody's looking at you, that just kind of short circuits your brain when you're not used to it. But moving to probably my last question, we're at an hour and 23. I know spending time in person, like ideas start flowing and relationships kind of keep building. What was your biggest takeaway from spending more time with Debbie instead of just phone calls and maybe Zoom meetings? What was the biggest kind of positive that came out of your time together with Debbie?
Any time that you could spend face-to-face time with somebody that doesn't necessarily agree with everything you agree upon, or you come from two different worlds, I think it's a good thing because you start to find common ground in certain things. So like, sitting with Debbie and listening to her, we're both from the East Coast. She's from Philly. I'm from Jersey. We have a lot of common there. I think the biggest takeaway is like you kind of learn to appreciate other people's views on things. And Debbie and I have some like great conversations. I kind of wish were being filmed, just because of the way that we kind of play with each other's ideas. And like I said, she's not the biggest gun supporter, but her she's coming around, and her son is like her son is like right up the 2A alley, like which we were laughing about because it's like, and you don't want something, you don't like something, and then all of a sudden you have a kid that's just like totally into it. So her son has helped a lot with her come around. He's an avid hunter, loves firearms. Has her shooting shotguns now and stuff like that. So she's coming around. So that's what's fun about it, is kind of just the more time you spend together, um, whether you're having a drink or you're eating together, or I'm learning from her, because she's got so much. I mean, she's been in this game forever. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm always curious about the mental health side and how the game's played, and it's not a game, but like everything is a game. Like life is a game, right? Like you're trying to figure it out. It's like chess. So it's just always interesting to hear like her stories of working behind the scenes and what they do with like legislation, not on gun stuff, but it's just like mental health stuff, right? And like, she was huge on the 988 number, right? Like Mental Health America was really behind that. It's how they get that stuff accomplished. And it's just like, it's something the gun industry doesn't have, is people like Debbie. I always say the gun industry, and I use this example, and it's probably not the best example, because the example I'm going to use, they're villains, but the gun industry needs a 7. If anybody watches um, The Boys is a show about superheroes, right? It's on Amazon. And in The Boys, there's a group of superheroes that's the 7, and they're generally shady, but they also have the public believing that they're out there doing work in the public and saving lives and things like that. But I really feel like the gun industry needs a 7. It needs a group of people that are out at all these events and are known as, hey, that's the firearms industry people, and that 7 should have nothing to do with the NRA. It needs to be other groups, and it needs to be individuals from different pockets, right? Like, so if I had to pick my 7, I'm definitely picking Lara Smith from Liberal Gun Club. I'm picking Kevin Dixie, right? There's just certain people that I would pick, and I would say like, this superhero is best fit for this type of event. And it's really building bridges and making contacts with people, and I feel like we lack that. And it's necessary, man. Um, Especially when there's so much misinformation about guns in the firearms industry. It's super necessary. You got to have people out there that can connect to people and make them have nuanced discussions, and literally be like, all right, you're all right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to rethink the way I feel about this, and now you're my guy. Like, you're my guy that I'm going to contact if I have questions. um I don't know how we've overlooked that. It's beyond me. And it doesn't always have to be like a pry it from my cold dead hands 40-year-old white guy. Hey, take me out of it, right? Like, maybe I hit the stereotype, but there's a way that we can do this and gain traction. And like I said, my goal to go into those things is to change everybody's mind. Like, I feel like I'm going to be the one that changes you off, gets you off of your red flag law belief. And if I don't get you off the belief totally, I'm going to point out all the flaws and make you change it for the better. Like, that's the way I look at it. And that's a baby step, right? That's making you compromise. And we need to get back to that. So,
Yeah, it would be cool if the firearms industry kind of united and put on their own summit and said, here's our 7, here's our people. They're gonna host their panel about their area of kind of expertise, and we also want to show that we're looking to reduce these negative outcomes, and here's our solutions, and invite the mental health Americas, invite the other side in to sit on that, instead of just having great ideas and only one side, people that are on the same side hearing about it.
yeah, I mean, if you had a firearms and mental health, or mental health and firearms convention, that was open to the public, and it was open to, both sides, and it was very inviting, I think people would be curious, right? Like, a bunch of people showed up to the Stop the Stigma together, and then we tested the waters with the firearms thing. I I'm not afraid to do that. I'm not afraid to invite and open it up to people that are not necessarily on our side or in our camp. I think that if it's done the right way and it's presented in the right manner, like, we could change a lot of hearts and minds.
Yeah, and those conventions make a lot of money, so it's not just, donating some giant portion of money that doesn't go anywhere. I don't know. I'm not a convention organizer, but I know they make at least break even or do a hell of a lot better than that. So that
Yeah.
seems that would be something cool to see.
Yeah. 100%. All right. We
Alright,
should
take us
wrap this
home.
up. Yeah. We're going to talk for 30 minutes. Um, uh, I want to thank everybody that tuned in and listened to this. I hope it helped in terms of like giving more hope and just seeing some cool things that the gun industry is going to do that no one's ever going to find out about or know about, right? Um, but obviously, stay tuned for more of this work. Uh, we look forward to it. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun year, especially with some of the things that happen or some of the things that like we have queued up actually break, which is going to be cool. But as always, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank the Rugers. We want to thank NASGW, the Lipsies, Davidsons, everybody that helps make this work, especially the people that have been loyal fans to this and have tuned in. G-Webs, you're always here, man. I got to shout you out. We definitely are going to get that mental health plan to you. But thanks, and till next time.